Hello, good evening. Welcome to everybody. This is Reading by the Moon, and today we are delighted to have with us beautiful Belinda Alexandra, who has written this gorgeous non-fiction book called The Divine Feline, the Chic Lady's Guide to a Woman's Best Friend. And we've got several people holding out there who've also read it. Thank you so much for coming along, Belinda. It's so lovely to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's awesome to be in good company.
Yes, isn't it just? It's always a bunch of cat lovers, and we, a number of us on the panel have cats, and they're here in the room with us, so they may walk across the screen. Hopefully they will. They'll grace us with their presence. That would be lovely. Belinda, if you don't know Belinda, she is a best-selling author of 9 fiction books, and they're historical fiction, and most of them have a magical twist to them as well. And this is your first non-fiction book, this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, great. We'll get on to that very, very soon. And Belinda is joining us from Sydney as well. Belinda, there's a lot going on in this book. So you've covered a lot of history to do with cats and their relationship with humans. You've got quite a lot of animal welfare info in there, obviously. We've got quite a lot of magical influences as well. And what else? There's a lot of cat care as well, about how to live in harmony with your cat, all of which is great. For me, right at the beginning, I was really taken with the history, because I think most of us know that sort of cats, or that sort of connection with humans started in Egypt around the Nile, and cats were great for ratting and keeping down the rats and the mice, because that was when they started growing grain and that kind of thing. But the thing that really struck me, which I loved and made so much sense, was that unlike dogs, who we have bred for centuries and thousands of years into really kind of narrow ideas about what that dog does. So retrievers retrieve things, and and Dobermans guard things, and we've given them roles. We're like, you're a ratter, or you're a guard dog, or you're a retriever, or you're whatever you are. You round up sheep, whatever it is that you do, you have a job to do for us, to serve us. And that never happened with cats. The cats are essentially exactly the same as they were thousands of years ago. And that just made so much sense to me as well, as to why cats are so, they are self-sufficient. And it's always amazes me, often the things that some people don't like about cats are the things I absolutely love about them, that they don't care at all whether you like them or not, that they are totally self-possessed in their belief that they deserve all good things in life. I love that. I envy that. I think, wow, I wish I could be more like that. They just have such great self-esteem about their place in the world. So for me, that was really, really great and fun. Was it a fun book to research in that sense?
Yeah, look, absolutely. With the book, you pointed out that it's got lots of different things in it. And I was actually approached by a publisher to write that book. It wasn't a book that I went to the publisher with the idea. Kelly Doust from Murdoch Books rang me one evening, and she said, "Belinda, would you like to write a book on cats?" And it was sort of like that Luke Skywalker moment, when he's called to serve the Empire. And it's just, this is what he was born to do. And I sort of just had this moment of like, yeah, I was born to write this book on cats, because I knew all the sort of elements that people who love cats, and especially women who love cats, would love to have in it. And so I wanted to create a book that was like a big girl's compendium of all things delightful for cat women. So it does have, sayings, and it does have some humor in it, and it has the history of women and cats, so we understand that. But I also really wanted to arm people with all the things that they can go out with into the world when people attack them for loving cats, but also to understand their cats and understand their cats' needs more, so that they can actually have a closer relationship with their cats. But I have always loved cats as great examples of self-care, because cats are affectionate. A lot of people say that they're aloof, but they're not aloof. They're actually discerning, because they're small animals. I mean, we often think of them as predators because they eat mice and rats, but they're actually preyed on by other animals in the wild. So they are really attached to their territory, and they always have to know if their territory is safe. So they just don't run up to anybody and love them immediately. They like to observe. They like to see, is this person a safe person? Does this person feel safe in my territory? And I think that's a great example, especially for women, because I think not in all cultures, but in our culture, sometimes we just open ourselves too widely, too quickly when we don't really know somebody very well. We tell, just because another person's a woman doesn't mean that you should tell her absolutely everything about your life. It can put you in danger. And, also in a dating situation, you probably shouldn't give all your personal details to someone that you barely know as well. And so I think cats can teach us that little bit of self-respect and that little bit of restraint that actually keeps us safe, both emotionally and physically.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I also, one of the things that sort of upset, like I'm an animal because I just love all animals, and it always really bugs me when people say, "Oh, are you a cat person or a dog person?" I think, why do I have to be either? Why can't I just love them all? And I know, some of my friends are internet dating or mobile phone dating these days, and and they're literally asked this question: are you a dog person or a cat person? Why? Why is there this divide? And of course, you address that as well. Do you want to do a bit of a quick summary of why that break has come, I guess, between respect for cats and historically what happened, I guess, to lower them in the eyes of people?
Yeah. Well, firstly, just with that dog and cat question, really it's only dog people ask that question. Cat people don't really care. I mean, cat people tend to just like all animals anyway. Dog people are a bit more competitive. And I mean, this is generalizing dog people, but I find, like, for instance, cats are basically a cat, right? And one of the things that I think is quite funny is that my friends who love cats, we can show each other pictures and share pictures of each other's cats for hours, and it never becomes competitive. We never say, well, my Tiddles does this, or, whatever. We just laugh because we know we have no control over these cats. We can love them and look after them, but they are going to be whoever they are. Whereas people get a bit more competitive with children, for instance. Like, people get tired of looking at their friends' children's pictures after a while because it's more competitive about when little Tommy started to walk, and, little Annabella speaks 5 languages and she's only 7 years of age. But it's a little bit of that in dog people. And when you think about it, as we talked about all the different breeds of dogs, we really don't have that in cats. And some people may have a purebred cat, but it's not really any higher prestige to have a Burmese than it is to have a rescue cat. A cat is sort of a cat. And so I think that question generally doesn't come from cat people. But going back to the fall from grace from cats, is first I'll just say how they got the status of gods in the first place. And Josephine, you mentioned how in ancient Egypt they were farmers who had to store their grain, and there were rats and mice attracted to the granaries. And the African wildcat, which is the ancestor of the little cats that we have around us now, used to come down from the mountains because it was attracted to these mice and rats. It was a steady, supply of food. And so the farmers wanted to keep these cats around. So they started giving them treats, and they started, providing, like, fire in winter to keep them warm, and all of this kind of stuff to entice the cats to stay around. And eventually the cats got used to the humans, and it became a nice relationship. Because the cat was always around the home, they became associated with women, because women were looking after the grain stores, and the cats were also fertile creatures. And they were also clean creatures and beautiful creatures. They kept snakes and scorpions away from the house as well, so women really liked having them around. So there became a close association with women. But in ancient Egypt, women had high status, and the goddesses in Egypt were extremely powerful. And when Egypt was trading with other countries, one of the main goddesses from Egypt, Isis, she was transferred into Greece and into Rome, and she became the most important goddess of all. She was the supreme goddess of all gods. And so women had high status. They had equal rights in a divorce. The assets were divided equally. They could choose their marriage partners. If a marriage ended, I think it was very interesting. The husband could choose one cat and the wife would get the rest of them. And so there was this strong association between cats and women. So when cats fell, it was actually due to their association with women. Because when you get the rise of patriarchal Christianity, you get the lowering in status of women. Women were ousted out of their positions of power. Their power was taken away from them. And also, unlike the Egyptians, who believed in many gods and believed that there was the divine was in everything, in animals and trees and rocks and everything, in Christianity you've got one God and one God only, and you can't worship anything else. So they had to get rid of all competing religions. And one of the best ways to get rid of competing religion is to destroy anything that religion holds, of value. And so cats had already been associated with the goddesses like Isis and Bastet. And so basically women were denigrated and cats along with them. Black, I think is really interesting, had always been a magical colour to the Egyptians because it was the colour of night and it was the colour of Isis's robe. So of course the church made anything black an evil colour, satanic. So particularly black cats were satanic. And of course they started burning women who insisted on staying with the old religion, and they burnt cats along with them. So people sort of saw cats as the embodiment of evil. They were associated with the old religions, the old pagan religion. So that's really what happened there. And I think in some ways we're not quite over it. I mean, people still, I have 3 black cats because it's still hard to adopt out black cats. People still have superstitions that they're unlucky. And so I really wanted to bust a few of those myths in the book so we can start seeing things, a bit differently.
Yeah, we've done a really a great job of that and putting that in perspective of how that has always happened. And I've always known that intuitively, that it's sort of this sort of cat hatred sort of closely goes along with misogyny and female suppression as well. But that really clarified of how that came about and how it's just gone on and on and on over centuries as well. I'm going to throw over to Sabrina now, who said to me that you appreciate being a cat mum more now after reading this book. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I do. I really love the insightfulness that Pebbles had to offer throughout the book. It was so cool. I loved how you wrote the first letter to Pebbles in asking basically how you should introduce the cats in each one and what we as cat mums or cat companions should be called. So I love that set up the book, but the insightfulness that Pebbles gave me was the one about Tiffany and Rejected. So that hit home for me because Paddington Huggles has no love for me whatsoever, but I've been trying the little eye tricks. And just being as aloof as he is, and he actually came and sat on my lap like maybe 2 weeks ago, and it's made my whole year. I've had this cat for 2 years, and that's the most affection he has ever given me. So I really appreciated that. Thank you.
You're welcome. It is really sort of going back to what we were talking about earlier, is that I sort of try and tell people with their cats, if you could think back to when you were a child, and do you remember you had that auntie or neighbour who had the big hair and the perfume, and she was really loud, and she'd see you when you were a little child and she'd go, "You're so cute," and she'd, squeeze your cheeks and then kiss you with her smelly perfume. As a child, you were like, "Oh my God, mummy, protect me." And I think with cats, I do describe that. Pebbles describes that as, and Pebbles, of course, is my alter ego, I think. And, he sort of says that you've got to treat your cat like a woman. She's got to be coaxed. She's got to be intrigued by you. You can't be all over her like a rash. Cats smell desperation, just like dates smell desperation. So
if you think of desperation,
so if you can sort of, stand in your subtle power with your cat will become intrigued by you, and it will become a beautiful love story.
Nice. Thank you very much. So, yes, that's what I loved about the book so much. Gave me some hope.
Beautiful love story, Sabrina. I'm loving that. I'd like to check in with you in another 6 months and see how that relationship is going.
Please.
They'll be on their honeymoon then.
There we will be. I have faith.
Sandy, I wanted to cross to you because you are our sort of non-cat person, so to speak, in the group. How did you go with the book?
I feel like a bit of an imposter amongst this group of readers today. But yes, I have never had a cat companion. I have a dog companion. And so this book was a really interesting read for me and a huge eye-opener. And you mentioned, Belinda, at the beginning that you were wanting to bust a few myths with it. And I can absolutely say, and I hate to use this phrase after reading this book, but as a dog person, you have definitely busted some myths for me. Like Josephine, I found the history fascinating, but I also really enjoyed the cat wisdom that was sprinkled throughout the book. And I think I would like to photocopy some of those pages and stick those around my office. Awesome. Because I've definitely seen not only cats in a new light from reading your book, but how they relate to us as humans and in particular as women. And I never thought I could learn that much. So I wanted to thank you for that and ask you, were those bits of cat wisdom what you have observed from being a cat companion for so long?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those things, I think, and this is true for any animal, because like Josephine, I've written a book about cats, and cats are the companion animal that I've had, but I love all animals, even the wild ones that dig up my garden. I still have tremendous love for them. And I think any animal that we have, I really believe that there's a spiritual dimension, and I sort of talk about that in the book as well, that, there's an interspecies love is a special thing because the communication is very different to how it is with other human beings, and the level of our relationship is different. I sometimes think we're happier with our pets because they are less complicated than the relationships we have, except in Sabrina's case, of course, than the relationships we have with other humans. But I think they reflect so much of us. So a lot of that wisdom was really about the relationship that I've had with my cats and what I've learned from them. And I think it's because I'm open to it. And that's really what I would say about the magic of life. Like, magic is all around us and wisdom is all around us. We just have to be more open. I think sometimes, it's like we've got our heads down and we're seeing a very narrow view of the world. But when we start to open ourselves to life, I think everything has something to teach us. Our animals, the trees, all sorts of things, even our own bodies. We don't listen to our own bodies, but there's a wisdom in our own bodies as well. And so for me, I focused on the wisdom of cats, but I hope that, from this book, people can open themselves to all sorts of magic and all sorts of wisdom that's around them.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's what I'm going to take with it, because you're right. We're so caught up in our own narrow part of our own world that we forget to connect in that way. And it's definitely something I hope to take with me from it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Beautiful. Well, while we're all talking about magic, I might cross over to Marie-Louise then, who loved all the magic in the book.
Well,
Riley,
that's
do you
my
want to talk about that?
department. Hello. Hi. But, I love the book, you know, in its entirety, from the beautiful velvet spine of it, which just felt so tactile while I was reading it. But the magic side of it really I connected with and resonated with. And I loved the sprinkles of it throughout, you know, from the puff of glitter when you opened the music book and had your mum there with you. And then all the bits and pieces that you put in with just different ways that we can use magic and connect with our cats in the same way. So I was just wondering if you had any other ways you enjoy magic with your cats. I know you mentioned briefly that you a little bit of tarot. Do you do tarot readings with your
I don't. I'd like to learn more about tarot. I think ways that I connect to the divine is I love dance, and I do flamenco and belly dance, and that amuses my cats no end when I'm practicing. especially in an outfit that's got lots of jingly bits on it. It's like, oh my goodness, it's a, you know, our mum has dressed herself up as a giant cat toy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of excitement when that happens. But I think, again, magic, it's not so much what you do, it's really who you are. And so I do try to have a practice every day of remembering to, and it deepens the more you do it. There's sometimes when you start something, you think, this is ridiculous, nothing is happening. But when you start to open yourself a little bit, then the gap opens a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And so the way I try and engage with magic is really to be in the present moment. And I think that's another thing that I've really learnt from my cats, because, you know, a lot of this could sound like, you know, crazy stuff. But stuff that sounded like crazy stuff only a few years ago is now being taught by psychologists and scientists. And one of those things that I think is, you know, the practice of mindfulness, suddenly it's become this commercialized thing, whereas our ancestors were practicing it, you know, thousands of years ago. But if you think about a cat, for instance, a cat isn't thinking so much about its past. It's not bringing up childhood memories or going over what its ex-cat did to it or whatever, or you know, going over that. And it's not worrying too much in the future. It's probably thinking, I wonder when my dinner's coming, but that's like as far in the future as it thinks. It's not thinking too far in the future. Its mind is very much in the present moment. And that's really, I think, where magic happens, is as much as we can get into the present moment. And when we're in the present moment, we're in the zone. And athletes talk about that, and all sorts of people talk about that. And everyone who's creative here, who paints or dances or writes, just knows that moment where you're in the zone. And now science is telling us in that moment, when we're really in the present, they can actually do MRI scans, look at our brains, do other scans, and see that our brain waves actually become coherent. Most of the time our brain waves are incoherent. We're thinking about this, we're thinking about that, we're thinking about the past, we're thinking about the future. It's exhausting for our brain. But our brain actually, when we come into coherence, our heart starts beating calmly, we start to feel love, we start to feel the rightness of life, we start to feel purpose. And I think that is a magical state, and it feels magical when you're in that state. So I think it's not so much what you do. You can do anything. You can do tarot, you can do forest bathing, you can do all sorts of things. But I think the most important thing is to get into that present moment, that sweet spot of the present moment. And when you're there, you will connect to magic. And I just think that's a beautiful moment. And the thing is, it takes a bit of practice to do. It's actually a skill, because we've not been taught that. We're distracted by this, we're distracted by this, and our brains are used to, we wake up in the morning and the first thing we do is think about our problems. And that sort of just reaffirms the past or the future. We don't really just wake up in the present moment. But all those things we can actually teach ourselves to do. And so I think magic in many ways, it's mysterious, but it's also a skill.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, and anyone who's practiced meditation in any small way will know that it is very, very difficult to to not think. You can't not think, and what you need to do is train yourself to observe the thinking, of course. But it is a skill, definitely. It takes a long time, and animals just do it so naturally, and they're great teachers in that sense, I think. Mary Lou, you house sit a lot, and so I think you have lived temporarily with a lot of different cats. Has your time with cats made you, or changed your view of them, or changed your relationship, or the way you relate to them, just having lived, even in small spaces, small stints, I should say, with a lot of cats over that time?
I think the main thing that I've noticed is that every cat is so different. A lot of dogs are very similar. It's that whole thing from one of my favourite movies, Up. I've only just met you and I love you. A lot of dogs are like that. Where every cat is different. And the two cats I'm looking after at the moment are just so particular about every single thing in completely different ways. So I find them fascinating, I really do. But Belinda, what I wanted to ask you was your experience with feral cats, because I've had a few experiences in the past that have ended in absolute disaster, I've got to say, ending up just scratched and scarred and having to give up. But you have a lot of save the cat moments in this book. And I'm wondering if you have any advice. Most people will say that you cannot rehabilitate a feral cat at all.
Yes.
And that's been my experience.
Yeah.
So I know we're running out of time, but just so quickly, I mean, clearly you've had a very different experience with feral cats.
Yeah, because just as I did earlier, I'll just show you my 3 former ferals. So, look, I think I mean, the story I tell in the book is that I came across these feral cats living in a car park, and they're completely unsocialized is probably the better word to use for them. They're not used to any sort of human contact, and they were wild. I'd never experienced cats like that. I had 2 Burmese living at home who were privileged. They'd come from a breeder. They'd never known any danger, and they were friendly with everyone. Whereas these cats were really wild and really vicious, and particularly their mother was a vicious cat. But I just knew that if I left them in that car park, they were just going to breed and breed and breed. And already they were under the threat of a pest exterminator coming to get them. So I knew I had to get them out of there, and I was a wildlife carer, so I had the traps. But I was very fortunate to make contact with the beautiful Helena Thompson, who I talk about in the book as well, from the World League. And she has done it many times. She's converted feral cats into beautiful domestic cats. So my whole experience, I would say this, and I think it's true for our companion animals, no matter where they've come from, but in all animals, that the most important thing I've learned is that fast is slow and slow is fast. So with the cat, you really need to go at their pace. You need to really let them set the pace. If you try and rush them, you can end up taking a cat backwards. So when I had these cats, I had a workshop attached to my house. I had them in a big cage, and my only interaction with them was just to feed them and change their kitty litter. They were far too vicious for me to be anywhere near, but I would just sit with my laptop and work, and I'd be there for 6 hours, and it was that thing of coming back to the territory of letting them observe me and letting them decide that I was safe, that I wasn't doing anything. I didn't try to talk to them. I didn't try to get them to interact with me. And with their mother cat, I mean, the first night she totally shredded her whole cage, and I thought, is this cruel, me having such a wild cat that all she's known is the wild? But something in me just told me to gently persist with her. And I just remember the moment when she's, it was probably 6 months down the track, and it depends how much time you've got. It takes a lot of time with these cats. You have to be prepared to spend the time. And when she reached out her paw, to me in a friendly manner that cats do. And I sort of thought, I can either touch this paw and risk never playing the piano again, or I could just let it be a moment of trust. And it was a moment of trust, but she had to extend that. And I know that vets were really amazed, and everyone's really amazed about these 3 boys. But I think it's entirely possible. I think with love and with patience, I haven't seen a cat that doesn't come around. And their mother eventually ended up sleeping with 2 small children, being adopted by them. And I would never have allowed that if I had any doubt. Because people kept telling me with Gucci, because he was very, very wild, they were saying, oh, you know, he'll be tame for a while, but suddenly he'll turn on you. And, you know, I've had him for 10 years and I'm still waiting for him to, you know, eat me in my sleep. But he really hasn't. And he was totally the devil cat. So I think it's probably any experience with animals, whether it's, I don't know a lot about dogs. I love dogs and horses as well. But I'm just seeing just with gentleness, just with time, just going at the cat's pace, letting the cat set the pace, just seems to work.
Well, they're beautiful stories and really inspirational stories for anybody who, you know, loves cats or loves rescuing animals, and really just shows you what you can achieve if you know, your heart's in the right place and your time and your patience and everything's all aligned. So that should give, you know, I think a lot of people a lot of hope of what can be achieved. I did want to ask you finally about, I was saying just before we went on air, my husband is a huge cat lover. My son is, cats are absolutely, he's a cat person. Like, he's everywhere he goes, he finds cats and the cats come to him. He just loves them. And, you know, there are a lot of men around who love cats. There's a guy traveling around Australia who's got an Instagram account called Cat Van Meow, I think it is. And he's just traveling around Australia with his cat. So I wonder how we can break down these stereotypes a little bit of, you know, cats are women's animals and dogs are men's animals, and how do we get a bridge going there to get sort of, you know, good men, good cat lovers involved in this conversation and advocating for cat welfare and acceptance and all of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think that's very important. I wrote a book directed at women, mainly because of that cat lady stereotype, that I wanted to break that down. And also, I really wanted to get across that self-care side between women and cats, because I think that's really important. But absolutely, I think my parents gave me a love of all animals, but they were both big cat lovers. And I think it's funny, when my dad comes to visit, he goes, "Hi, Belinda, where are the cats?" It's like he's totally interested in the cats. My brother has just adopted another cat from the pound. So, and my nephews are all crazy about cats. They've rescued cats themselves as well. So actually, it is, you know, around me as well, there's definitely men who love cats. But I did want to, in this book, address that connection between women and cats and misogyny that we talked about. But I do think it's very important that we get away from the stereotype about men and cats that we tend to have in Australia, as I said, more than there is in the States, because there are so many cats in our cities living in terrible conditions on the street. There's so many cats in pounds. I mean, hundreds of thousands are killed simply because they're not wanted. So it would be terrible for men to feel that they couldn't have cats in their lives for whatever reason. But I think there might be a slight difference. I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking, if a woman has 10 cats, she's kind of a crazy cat lady. If a man had 10 cats, he'd probably be referred to as a genius of some sort. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something really interesting about him. Like, women cook every day of their lives, but if a man cooks, it's like, you know, it's got this high status to it. So I say to the guys, go for it. You know, if you love cats, go for it. Celebrate it, because you probably don't have that crazy cat lady stereotype to deal with. And, you know, all that kind of stuff, it's just such rubbish. And life is too short. It's too short to not enjoy what you really love. So women should love cats freely and not worry what anyone else says about them. And men should love cats and whatever else they like to love, freely without any stupid macho images. And I think what I really liked in the States were how many men trained their cats to use the human toilet instead of kitty litter. I mean, they seem really determined that their cat was going to impress all their mates by using the toilet. So yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Yes, love it.
In our comments there, we've got Phil saying that he and his partner love their cat Millie, and Katie saying her husband frequently says that he likes cats better than people. So we're happy to hear that. We've got some loving men in our chat room as well. Does anyone on our panel have any final questions for Belinda before we let her go?
I do, sorry. I'm a bit of a fan. Yeah, audio books as well. I was just wondering if there's a new book that you might be working on.
Well, yes, right now I've just sent off my outline for it'll be my 10th novel. Yes, so hopefully that will come back with some feedback from my publisher and I'll be straight into that. So yeah, there's always a book. Books for me are like trains. Like I get one off and I think, gosh, I'm exhausted. And then like the next one seems to pull in with its ideas and say, come on, quickly, write down. So I really am just the train station of ideas, because there's always another book coming.
We're very happy to hear it, and we're happy to have you back anytime to talk about books and cats and anything else that we would like to chat about. This has been a really fabulous discussion. Thank you so much, Belinda, for joining us today. Phil also says that this was a brilliant book and he learnt lots, and Millie, his cat, appreciates all the new techniques that he's gotten. So obviously we've trained Sabrina and we've trained Phil. The cats doing their work, training everybody. So Katie says she loves her book so much as well. So thank you so much. It's been just delightful having you here. I feel like we should have connected a long time ago with our common interests.
Yes.
Writing and cats and animals and rescue and all that sort of stuff. So
I'm so glad we did. It's been so lovely. Lovely to talk to everyone, and thank you for your questions. It's been awesome.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Belinda. It's been lovely having you here.
Okay.
Just before we go, I'm just quickly going to ask everybody on the panel just to tell us what you're reading and whether you're loving it and whether you would recommend it. Marie-Louise, what are you reading at the moment?
I brought it with me, because otherwise I always forget what it is that I'm reading. I'm just finishing this, which is the Shelley Bay Ladies Swimming Circle. I am enjoying it a lot, although there's a lot of swimming and I'm actually not a swimmer, so I dislike it a lot. But I'm feeling like maybe I need to give it another go. But the story itself is really lovely, and I'm enjoying reading a book where the main characters are all a bit older, well, except for one character, but most of them are, and I'm really enjoying that. So yeah.
Lovely. Sabrina, what are you wearing? Oh no, what you're wearing. You're always dressed beautifully. What are you reading?
Finishing up Sandy's book.
Yay!
It's been my summer read. It went on holidays with me and I'm loving it. My heart hurts, but I love it so much. Enjoying this. I'm nearly finished. So when I finish this one, Josephine, I'm waiting for your book too.
Yes, can't wait for that.
Yes, the final proofread sitting there staring at me, waiting for me to get on and finish it. So yes, school holidays, always a bit challenging. That's great. Sandy, what are you reading at the moment?
Well, I can only read one book at a time. I can't multitask in that area of my life. So I only finished Belinda's book last night. My next one will be The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. That'll be my next one. And I can't show it to you because, as Joe knows, I'm not at home at the moment, so I'm not surrounded by my books, but that will be my next one.
Nice. Lovely. Mary Lou, what are you reading?
I've actually just finished reading Karen Brooks' book, The Chocolate Maker's Wife, which is set in the 1600s, the restoration, and I just found it fascinating. I loved it right from the start all the way through. I wanted to read a bit about Quakers, and I said to her, 1600s, you probably know a bit about Quakers, because that's when it all started. She told me the book she's writing at the moment has a lot more Quakers in it, but there are some Quakers in this. I'm just so everyone knows I'm fascinated with Quakers, and that's my heritage. And I love this book. And one of the really interesting things is, of course, she wrote it before the pandemic, but it is set during the time of the plague in London. And so much of what they did back then is similar to what we've had to do, the social distancing, the disinfection, the quarantining, and it's 16.
Wow.
And so it's just been really, really interesting. Plus Quakers, what's not to love?
So great. Sounds fascinating. I am reading what I'm going to refer to as my cocktail and cheese eating book club's book.
Oh, yes.
For the week or the month, which is called You, Me, Everything by Catherine Isaac, which is set in England. And it actually has, it surprised me, there's a I can't give it away, but there's a medical thing in the book, which kind of came out of nowhere. And I actually have there's some family connection with that. So I'm actually finding it quite interesting to consider it. It's not something I've thought about for many, many years, but it's interesting to consider it again from a different stage of life and a different, I didn't end up with the condition, but I could have. And so it's a really interesting thing to consider at this stage of life with a child and all those sorts of things. So yeah, it's keeping me interested there as well. So that's it from all of it. Oh, Belinda, what are you reading at the moment?
Actually, I didn't have it on my desk, but I'm actually doing a Sisters in Crime panel this week. And so I read two great writers, Lisa Walker, The Girl in the Gold Bikini, and Sarah Thornton, White Throat. And so they're both crime novels, but what I thought was really interesting about them, they're both set in Australia, and the theme of the panel that we're doing is crime by the seaside, and why the seaside makes such a great setting for a crime or a mystery story. And I really loved both stories because they had this great Australian dry humour through them. So I can highly recommend them because I thought they were very, very good. They were, very well plotted, but they were also a lot of fun to read.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you everyone on the panel. Thank you so much, Belinda, for being here. Thank you to all our cats who came and chose not to screen, other than Mara Louise's, who's been a little bit in the background there, and of Sabrina's as well, who did turn up.
Dragged him on.
A quick snuggle there as well. And we will see you again next time. I'm not sure who's coming next.
Thanks so much, ladies.
It'll be somebody fabulous. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.